November 351 Charlie. Google search that number and you'll find out that it is the registration number of a pretty obscure racing plane designed and built in 1949 by Neil Loving. It's called the WR1 Racer, although it's more popularly known as Loving's Love. It was built to compete in the Goodyear Trophy races in the early 50s, and I'm not sure that it ever actually competed. I know that it was entered in the 1951 races and was withdrawn because he had problems with the spinner on the propeller hub. Before I tell you more about this model, I'd just like to take a minute to say thanks to all the viewers. We really appreciate your views, your interest, subscriptions, and especially comments. We've met and exchanged messages with modelers from all over the world, and we'll keep the videos coming as long as the interest is there. This model's color scheme is identical to the prototypes as it appears today. It's preserved in the EAA Museum in Oshkosh, and these are not the colors that it originally had when it was first built. Originally, the full-size one was maroon and cream with scallops and carried race number 64. This model's all hand-cut striping, including all the pin striping. It's a Coverite product called Coverlight, which sort of looks like doped tissue, the old-fashioned look. You can see through it a bit and see the wood grain. The model here is skinned with 1/16 balsa on the fuselage, back to where the original was. The original airplane was a wooden structure, plywood skinned over the forward part, and stringers and fabric in the back. The cowling, the engine enclosure, and cylinder head cowlings were aluminum sheet metal on the original. I've also duplicated the prototype's look on the tail surfaces. You can see the fixed portions are actually built up with a 1/16 framework internally, covered with 1/32 balsa that stacks up to equal 1/8 of an inch, and the movable parts are framed up out of 1/8 of an inch, and that duplicates the look of the original, which the fixed portions were plywood covered and the control surfaces were fabric covered frames. I've already shown you the spinner. I'll show you some other features on the model. The cylinder head cowlings, blisters, are molded fiberglass, and there's the mold right there. And I used a trick to really make a lightweight molded piece, and I'll show you a little more about that later. Coming down, we talked a little about the landing gear, and I made these so that they actually have a suspension. They're spring, coil spring suspended, and you can see the motion there. There we go. I'll show you how those work when we get the airplane turned over. Also, since it's scratch built, of course, there's a bubble shape to that canopy, and so that means you're going to mold one, vacuum form it, as I did here. I vac formed it out of some 016 thick clear plastic material from the hobby store, and the mold is right here. Both of those molds were just carved out of balsa wood, and a couple coats of primer on there to smooth it out. Alright, we'll get this airplane turned upside down so I can show you the bottom. Alright, these are the prints I came up with after scaling the 3 views up, and I've left the stringers out so you can see the structure a little better. Working back to the vertical tail surface, and you can see the faired in, half-hidden tail wheel assembly there that the original had. And I duplicated that on this model. You can check it out. There it is. And it's separately driven by a separate push rod from other than the air surface, so that I could control the throw on each one separately. And you can see the elevator control there too. Works nicely. Stringer, fabric covered stringer type construction here on the rear of the fuselage, where the original was also. And then working forward, the original was plywood covered, so that's what I've done here, is sheet it all with balsa wood. There's one of those crazy looking landing gears I was showing you earlier, and check it out, there's the spring loaded feature. Actually works pretty well. And over here I've got one opened up so you can see it. It's a 2.5 inch Dubro foam wheel, very light in spite of it looks like it weighs a ton, but actually very nice lightweight. There are some tubes down in here which are pieces of heavy duty nylon. They're wrapped with carbon fiber thread and then soaked with some hot stuff, so basically it's like a carbon fiber tube lined with very low friction plastic. And so the mating surface of it is aluminum tubing, just regular hobby store aluminum tubing, not even the high strength stuff, but it's got a birch dowel tightly fit and glued in internally to it to give it a little extra strength. And then the strut here is pivots on a little piece of WD-40 red plastic tubing, and it hinges forward. Oh, and inside there, you can't really see it, but there are coil springs. I played with different gauges of wire and so forth, and found out that the 13 thousandths thick steel wire, which was a B string on my electric guitar, it was the perfect tension to make the spring. That pushes in and then it retains itself. There's the spring-loaded action. And then the fairing is right here. You can see it's built up basically like a little canoe or kayak. It was a framework covered with 1/32 balsa, one layer of half-ounce weight fiberglass cloth, and it was built basically right on the wing after the landing gear was already in there. And it built kind of built around it. Put down a piece of sandwich wrap so it doesn't, so the glue doesn't stick, and then build that. There are some, again, little micro magnets, super magnets, rare earth magnets mounted in pairs, and that goes right on there, locates, and the magnets hold it. And there it is. You can hear it just, it snaps right on, and the magnets hold it great. The wheel does not rub on it. Works real slick. So that was a real success. The little fake exhaust pipes are plastic nylon tubing painted with some silver paint. Dab some magic marker inside. Look like carbon. Alright, we're going to get the wing off and take a look at the inside. Well, there's the wing sitting on the bench. You can see that it uses a single servo for the aileron, and I've got some 032 music wire push rods running in little plastic tubes out there. And yes, it does have that gull wing shape, and you would think that you could not get a cable through that, but actually there's almost a straight line if you cut the two corners, and it works really well. Going outboard to the or underneath it, you can see there are little access panels, and I made little 90-degree bell cranks in there with push rods out to the ailerons. The ailerons were just cut free from the foam wing, finished boxing them in with some balsa wood, and hinged them in there with some SIG easy hinges. And I didn't use the entire hinge, I just used cut some narrow strips from it. Oh, and did I mention I hand cut all the numbers? I'm still having nightmares about that. There was a whole lot of work with the pinstripe there. All right. Inside the fuselage, nothing too extraordinary, but I don't know if you can see it, but we're using balsa push rods, the old-fashioned way, balsa push rods with music wire ends, and you can see the rudder servo has two push rods. One goes to the tail wheel, one goes to the air rudder. Down in the bottom there with the green tape on it is an old school 72 megahertz, but it is at least a dual conversion FM. I live out in the country, so there's no interference, and the old stuff still works fine. Plenty of room up there for a battery pack. You wrap it in foam. I'm using a 1300 milliamp 2-cell LiPo, and it's just right. Gives me about 6 minutes of flight and balances the plane just right. So that's the interior. And you can see that construction. It's basically just balsa skinned, 1/16 inch, where the original was plywood covered. Nothing too fancy there. Alright, I'm going to show you a little slideshow of some construction photos, and I'll narrate that, and then at the end I'm going to include some flying shots, including the ill-fated, nearly disastrous maiden takeoff, which was a takeoff followed by a snap roll followed by straight in, and unbelievably no damage. It's still, as they say, no patches, no scratches. Unbelievable. So I'll show you some construction photos here, talk about some of the construction methods, and if you want to jump ahead to the end of the video, check out the flying, you can. The rest of you stick around, I'll show you some tips here. One more quick tip before we get into the slideshow. If you're using the cover light material that I used on this, the light blue, which actually is just called Cover Light Blue. Their part number is COVQ1804. And what I found is that the Sharpie pen is called a Sharpie Twin Tip, and the name of the color is turquoise. Sharpie Twin Tip Turquoise. It's got a regular tip at one end and a super fine tip at the other end. It's the perfect match to do a little touch-up if you get a bare spot of balsa showing out and you want to hide it. And also, I had a white nylon wing bolt there, a 1/4-20 nylon bolt. Hit it with that Sharpie, it's just the right color. So, if you're using Coverite 1804 blue, get yourself the Sharpie turquoise and do some easy touch-up. Alright, on to the slideshow. I scratch-built this model from my own blueprints, starting with 3 views in the book called The Air Racer by Charles Mendenhall. I scaled everything up 8 times, achieving a 40-inch wingspan and 1/6 scale of the full-size airplane. It's typical keel and former construction with stringers. Here's the side keel being added. At this point, the structure can hold its shape enough that it can be removed from the side view and the other side attached. Now we've got something that'll hold its shape. We begin skinning it with 1/16 inch balsa. There's a temporary piece in the canopy area there. Here we are adding stringers to the turtle deck, trial fitting the vertical stabilizer, and continuing sheeting the fuselage. Trial fitting of the steerable tail wheel with internal linkage, and cutting out the foam wing cores and sheeting them. Regular white insulating foam. Outer sections are sheeted with light 1/32 inch balsa, center section sheeted with 1/16. At this point, it's a simple matter to make some beveled cuts, glue it up at the correct angle to crank the wing, and then reinforce with some fiberglass tape at the joints. Here we're also beginning to add detail to the canopy area, making canopy bows and so forth. Ailerons cut free from the sheeted foam wings here. The horizontal tail surfaces being framed up, simulating the plywood construction of the original with fabric covered control surfaces. The propeller spinner laid up out of balsa wood rings, using the other airplane as a lathe, turned it down to a final shape here, as you can see here, to achieve the shape that was not available in a commercial spinner. Very lightweight, but it had to be balanced before use. I vacuum formed a custom canopy out of clear material there. Wingtips were carved out of blue foam, skinned with a half-ounce glass cloth to make them a little stronger. Here's the fiberglass cheek cowls and the plug made out of balsa wood that I formed them over. The ailerons cut free from the sheeted foam wing, hinged in there. And here we can build in the center section of the belly to ferret with the wing root area. The wheel skirts, fiberglassed and ready for covering. And here, having been attached to the wing with rare earth magnets, here we can see the pinstriping and so forth being applied. The whole airplane is covered with iron-on material. There's no paint on it except the spinner. So all the pinstripe and numbers that you see is all cut out from iron-on material. Here we are adding the third color, that dark blue on the fuselage side, and a top view of it. Also trial fitting the vacuum formed canopy there, and mocking it up for a good look at it before putting it to bed for the night. Next day, begin cutting out numbers and pinstripes. There's a whole lot of that. At this point, it's actually done, so I took it outside and took some still shots because I knew it was going to be a pretty scary maiden flight. So here it is, ready for flight. Let's go to the flying field, see how she does. Actually, before heading to the flying field, I thought some taxi testing would be in order because nothing at all had been tried, including the ground handling on this airplane. I wanted to make sure that it would at least be able to track in a straight line on takeoff. So I did some slow speed taxiing, as you see here, and also a few high speed runs, a little higher speed to make sure that it tracked all right. And it did. The tail wheel is a little hard. I wish it had a working suspension the way the mains do, but the turning was positive at slow speeds, very nice. And so we proved out that at least the ground handling would be all right when we got to the flying field. Also, at this point, I wanted to make sure that those little rare earth magnets would hold the wheel skirts up in place because they were the only thing holding it. Well, it was off to the flying field with some onlookers. Everything had been checked out several times, and I felt everything was ready for this flight. Unfortunately, what I didn't fully realize at all was that this airplane was actually tail heavy. The spot that I estimated the balance should be at was not right, and you can see the result there. Oh, that one hurt. In slow motion you can see it accelerating, a couple little bounces there. When we catch a view of it again, it's airborne at slow airspeed, going to the right. I correct to the left and lower the nose. It's too sensitive in pitch, the nose comes down, but then when I correct again, it's like a perfect entry into a snap roll there. Does a snap roll, nose first, inverted into the, it landed right next to a huge rock out there where you couldn't see it. And amazingly enough, no damage at all. it was ready to try again. Now, I didn't really at this point even realize that it was a tail heavy problem. I thought maybe I had just let it get too slow and got behind the power curve. So I tried again. Acceleration, had more speed that time, but wow, scary after it left the ground. Watch that one again in slow-mo. Tail comes up, a little bit of forward stick to keep it on the ground a little longer, and when it finally becomes unstuck, it's just all up and down in pitch, as it's super sensitive, and I'm realizing right now that it's really tail heavy. I managed to let it gain some speed, climb at a shallow angle. At this point, the spectators think it's been a great success, while I'm realizing that I've got a tiger by the tail, and I've got to learn to fly this thing and get it back down. Luckily, there's some 3-foot tall grass growing in that field there, and that's how I managed to get it down. A few days later, with the battery pack shifted forward to correct the balance, it's a takeoff, and just immediately it's a changed personality in that airplane. It just wants to groove around the field. Very confidence inspiring. Nice control, although the elevator's still quite sensitive, but stable. Aileron control very crisp and responsive, and so I take it up 2 or 3 mistakes high and slow it down to see what the slow flight characteristics might be. Get it turned around, and then the photographer wants it down a little lower for some photo work. At this point, I feel confident with it. It's responding very well at the higher power settings, so I have no problem taking it in and showing it to the camera. A lot of fun to fly this one. It really just wants to lock into a bank angle and follow it right around. You don't need to touch the rudder. It would be a great pylon racer, I think, just like the full-scale one was built to be. Well, that's enough playing around in front of the cameras. Got to take it upstairs and really explore the slow flight before bringing it in for a landing. Because although I was able to land it in tall grass the previous session, since then the farmer had hayed that field, so I realized from the beginning that this was going to have to be a landing on that pavement, just that the same place I took off from. So at this point I'm doing some approach stalls up at altitude, slow flight and approach stalls, and what I'm finding out is that it really wants to enter a snap almost. It wants to brake to the right very hard. When I put in some left rudder trim to correct it, it more or less broke straight ahead, but then it had like a secondary brake towards the left, so I realized at that point that there's another brake again to the right like that. That's just what it wants to do. I think if I was to build another one of these, I would make some washout in the outer wing panels, and I think it would probably cure that. But the tail surfaces on this airplane are scale size. I did not enlarge them at all, and I think that's a contributing factor. So there's a few things working against it. Well, after playing around with it slow, time to bring it down a little lower, circle the field a few times, and have my friend over there spot the car traffic on the road for me so I can find a break. There's not much traffic, it's a back road, but still you need somebody to spot for you, and you need to be able to go around. So a couple last circuits of the field. And down to treetop level or below. And the final time around. I'm asking for traffic condition. He gives me the okay, and I'm on a base leg, a right base for final here. Turning final. Starts, oh, and it was just a lucky timing of the elevator there. And it greased itself on, I think totally by luck, but I'll take it. Hand launch out over the 3-foot tall grass. Probably a safer way to fly this thing until I get the slow speed characteristics straightened out a little better. It's a lot of fun to fly at high speed. It's just beautiful, but as I say, I've got to get the slow speed straightened out a little bit. It's been a great project, a lot of work, building all the bits and pieces from scratch. I think the only things I bought for that airplane would be the main wheels and the electric motor and the radio. Everything was scratch built. The canopy, the spinner, the entire airframe. And yes, it's been a very rewarding project. A lot of fun to fly this thing. As of now, I don't have any plans to make the blueprints available. They're really not suitable for building from. They would need a lot of cleaning up, and I may do that at some point. But right now, I don't have any immediate plans to do it. So no, the plans will not be available. I did see one other WR1 Loving's Love model airplane on YouTube, and that was a 1/3 scale electric, beautiful one. And you should, it is in the same color scheme as this example here. And you should check that one out on YouTube. That's a nice looking plane. Well, I just want to say thanks for watching this video, and see you next time.
Closer to trees than I thought.